Can you dig it? I think we're on. I believe we're on. I'm almost certain we're on. It just has to wait for many things to pop up. Bear with me, folks. I know we're going to get started very soon. A little bit of technical difficulty earlier, but we're seem to be back up now. Whoo. I tell you, until you're your own tech support, you will never know the feeling of just trying to get the shit to work. But anyway, so pretty much, guys, like I said, give a brother one good second and be able to go from there very shortly. Like I said, I apologize. We actually should have been up way earlier than this, but yeah. So yeah, that was fun. Anywho, give me one more second. I know I've been saying that. I apologize so much. But thank you guys for being so patient. Yeah, I think that's all we're going to go with. All right, cool. All right, so I think we're good sharing, so we're just going to go ahead and walk right into this. All right, so let's do this. Today's date, January 12th, 2019, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most, Will Buchanan. On How the Frack We Got Here, we try to take every news from news from this week and just try to make sense out of it all. Because let's be honest, there's a shitload of that. For anybody else that's not been paying attention about my shows, let me go ahead and get this out the way. This is an adult podcast, which means adult content, language, and things of a certain nature may be shown. Viewer discretion is advised. Please make the next take the next 3 seconds to make the necessary adjustments. And that's Mississippi 3. All right, so for all those who stayed, welcome. Well, guys, every week on How the Frack We Got Here, I do try to see, because I said it before on many other podcasts, it's literally trying to watch Trump outdo himself. And let's be honest, the guy really has outdone himself. In so many ways and forms. The way I'm actually going to do it is because if anybody's been paying attention, we're still under government shutdown. That's right, kiddos. We've actually broken the record. The last record was 21 days of shutdown under President Clinton, and now we reached day 22. So if anything Trump can be famous for is that he literally kept the shutdown longer than any living president. But anyway, this is what's happening during the shutdown that you may want to know.
I thought about returning my son's Christmas gifts because of all of this. I am a single mom. My son just graduated his first 2 years of college. He's going back. I'm not getting paid. I just bought a house. I'm not going to be able to pay my mortgage.
So interesting enough, like I said, that's just part of it. Like I said, day 22 and counting, the government is still shut down. And like I said, with most things, like about the food actually bothers me because, like I said, this goes back to previous things that are shut down. So if you just saw the FDA, that's right, the FDA is having this problem.
that these people, these workers who have nothing to do with this ridiculous wall, aren't getting paychecks, especially right after the holidays. So I wanted to do our part to pitch in. Tonight and every night until the shutdown is over, we're going to put a federal employee to work here at the show. Government is partially shutting down.
President, two questions for you. Are you still proud to own this shutdown?
I'm very proud of doing what I'm doing. I don't call it a shutdown. I call it doing what you have to do for the benefit and for the safety of our country.
So honestly, I've never really understood, because as you saw, like I said, we're day 22, so we are beyond the point of a natural the longest standing shutdown, like I said, under President Bill Clinton. It is amazing to me where Trump, we have him on record in front of Schumer and the funny part was Schumer, which is crappy as that old man is, sat there and said to Trump, so, okay, we can have you on record right now. If we go to shutdown, it is ultimately your fault. Trump, yes, I will own the shutdown, okay? The shutdown is mine. I will own it if it makes you feel any better. There you go, recorded video. And you just saw the reporter go to him and say, are you proud of the shutdown that you said that you would? I don't call it a shutdown. I call it doing what you have to get what you want. You can call it whatever you want to, but there's plenty of people out there who are literally missing paychecks, and I'm going to show some stories I found because I think that is the important part. That is, to me, the important part where you have individuals out there that can't pay, their utilities, bills, car notes, their credit ratings are affected. It's all across the board. They have to negotiate with their bill collectors and mortgages or rent if they have it, simply because they thought at one point a government job was basically the job to have. You were covered no matter what, unless it was a shutdown. But let's just be honest, the thing that bothers me most about the shutdown is the lies that they tell. Because right now, like I said, for a lot of y'all, including myself, you might be looking forward to your income tax return, which is usually at this part of the year, would start at the end of the year. At the start at the end of January is when you start receiving your W-2s and can do all that rigmarole. Cool. May not be the case this time. Because, to be honest with you, the White House has sat there and said the IRS will still continue to process tax returns. The problem is the IRS is also on furlough, just like every other government agency, where more than half of its expected workforce is not working. The last time I looked at a publication about that, less than 10% of the actual IRS is still working, but they're only working on priority things, like science technology companies. They're not working on guys like you or me. So it's interesting when the White House sat there and said, well, they're going to bring back a majority of the IRS workers to handle the processing. And it's amazing to me that, folks who voted in Trump, are you still happy now? You may not get your tax return until March or May or farther. And the thing about that is, Trump is pretty much fighting for you. He's not fighting for you. He's fighting for a fucking wall, which again I'll go into. But again, like I said, we're gonna just move this shindig right along. So President Trump also gave an address this week, this Wednesday actually, and it was 9 minutes, which was kind of funny because Stormy Daniels said he lasted longer on camera than she did with him. And when you get ratted on, when you get blazed by a porn star, cancel Christmas. But anyway. But this is the only president in modern history to where every speech he's given, fact checkers are on him like flies on shit. So it's interesting where Now this did this, and I thought this was pretty cool because they went ahead and fact checked his 9-minute speech. Watch.
My fellow Americans, tonight I am speaking to you because there is a growing humanitarian and security crisis at our southern border. All Americans are hurt by uncontrolled illegal migration. It strains public resources and drives down jobs and wages. Our southern border is a pipeline for vast quantities of illegal drugs, including meth, heroin, cocaine, and fentanyl. More Americans will die from drugs this year than were killed in the entire Vietnam War. We have requested more agents, immigration judges, and bed space to process the sharp rise of unlawful migration fueled by our very strong economy. Law enforcement professionals have requested $5.7 billion for a physical barrier. At the request of Democrats, it will be a steel barrier rather than a concrete wall. The border wall would very quickly pay for itself. The cost of illegal drugs exceeds $500 billion a year. The wall will also be paid for indirectly by the great new trade deal we have made with Mexico. The federal government remains shut down for one reason, and one reason only, because Democrats will not fund border security. My administration is doing everything in our power to help those impacted by the situation. But the only solution is for Democrats to pass a spending bill that defends our borders and reopens the government. Day after day, precious lives are cut short by those who have violated our borders. How much more American blood must we shed before Congress does its job? To every member of Congress, pass a bill that ends this crisis. Thank you and good night. Thank you and good night.
You know, and this is now, thanks to now this for that, but the look on his face, is it just me? Okay, it could be just me. Because I look at that and I'm just like, for a guy who, you know, has no emotion, he was trying his hardest. And you know what? Props to his makeup person for trying to make him look normal, because I just think the oranger he gets, the more he becomes an Oompa Loompa. But anyway, but yes, he literally, when I said he made one false claim, I'm gonna call it what it was. He bullshitted every once a minute. And the thing about it is, the one thing that he does say that he harps on the best is wall. He keeps on changing up port security. Let's just be honest. border security is not a crisis. There hasn't been a crisis at the southern border for a while. Undocumented immigrant arrests have dropped. And on top of that, there's nothing going on at the wall except for the wall that you want. I mean, that's been his whole staple, the wall that Mexico will pay for, which, ironically enough, they will not pay for because Mexico will pretty much tell you, fuck you, pendejo. But anyway, it is amazing to me how Trump is going to say, well, if we don't do this, then this is going to be this whole wave. It's like, it's almost like you wonder how Adolf Hitler got to power. And I said, now, as a historical person, because I do like going about history and really seeking the truth in our past, but I've always wondered, even though I've read multiple books about the Third Reich and Hitler and how he came to power, I always wondered how a guy like him was able to get a nation to rise up and be so hateful and call themselves a superior race. Then you see Trump, and yeah, okay, no argument anymore. Because when I can see that happen with him and people that follow him, then I'm not actually surprised anymore. I'm saddened because he really does believe his shtick. I mean, he already has proven he's mentally unfit to be a president. That is true. But you want to know how much more mentally unfit he is? This was his response about the barriers.
That if we don't have barriers, walls, call it what you want, but if we don't have very strong barriers where people can not any longer drive right across the unbelievable vehicles, they make a lot of money. They have the best vehicles you can buy. They have stronger, bigger, faster vehicles than our police have, and than ICE has, and than Border Patrol has. So they're pretty good at that. They have areas that they go to, it's like a highway. And we have to close them up. And if we don't close them up, you're all kidding yourselves. Look, we can all play games. But the wall is a necessity. All of the other things.
Think about what he just said right there. He literally sat there and said his reason for the wall is because immigrants have better vehicles than federales, ICE, and border agents. Immigrants, which majority of them who have actually walked across the border with no issue. And you're going to sit there and tell me that part of your reasoning for a wall is because immigrants have better vehicles than the border security and ICE do. So let me understand this very correctly here. If that's the case, why the hell are they trying to get in our country? Because the logic doesn't make any sense. This is him being an unfit president, where he just turns around and says, well, you know what? That's the reason why they're coming over here. They have better vehicles. Well, if they have better vehicles than we do, why the fuck are they coming over here? And I mean, the literal rhetoric that he spits makes no sense, but just shows that it shows how mentally unfit of a president he truly is. Such as in this case, where you look at the meeting they had with Chuck Schumer and the Democrats as far as this, and this is what they said.
Because he couldn't get his way.
Talks between the White House and Democrats crumbling tonight.
Our meeting did not last long.
After President Trump stormed out of his meeting with congressional leaders when it became clear Democrats wouldn't budge on funding his border wall.
The president just got up and walked out. He asked Speaker Pelosi, will you agree to my wall? She said no. And he just got up and said, then we have nothing to discuss, and he just walked out.
Democrats declaring that the president threw a temper tantrum, as he tweeted that the meeting was a total waste of time, writing, I asked what is going to happen in 30 days if I quickly open things up. Are you going to approve border security, which includes a wall or steel barrier? Nancy said no. I said bye-bye, nothing else works. Vice President Mike Pence saying Democrats were unwilling to engage in good faith negotiations.
He asked Speaker Pelosi that if he opened things up quickly, if he reopened the government quickly, would she be willing to agree to funding for a wall or a barrier on the southern border? And when she said no, the president said goodbye.
The episode dramatically escalating a shutdown where talks were already at a stalemate. During a bill signing in the Oval Office today, Trump claiming he never wanted this shutdown to begin with.
This is not a fight I wanted. I didn't want this fight.
Despite saying on camera he was willing to take the blame.
I am proud to shut down the government for border security.
The president claiming today that the hundreds of thousands of federal workers who are bracing to miss their first paycheck Friday are backing his shutdown.
A lot of them agree with what I'm doing.
After stopping short of declaring a national emergency on the border during his primetime pitch, Trump leaving the door open today.
I think we might work a deal, and if we don't, I may go that route. I have the absolute right to do national emergency if I want.
Despite a growing number of moderate Republicans signaling they are ready to open the government with or without funding his border wall, Trump says the party is firmly behind him.
Mitch McConnell has been incredible. He said, if the president's not going to sign it, I'm not going to waste my time.
That confidence as Trump seems to be increasingly concerned about losing Republican support.
We have tremendous support in the Senate. We have tremendous support in the House. We have great Republican support. We will have border security. Tremendous Republican support. And I think we're going to win.
After a lunch with the president on Capitol Hill today, some Republicans seem to be growing impatient.
How can we resolve this? We owe it to the American people. This is like a circus.
Oh, it's a circus, all right. But it's a circus that you wanted, which is interesting where, the funny part about the whole thing is his whole thing is basically the border wall. His whole thing is, if I can't have the border wall, then that's all I really want. That's not border security. That's you wanting something because you said you wanted it. It doesn't mean that you actually think it's effective. And it's interesting where, like I said, excuse me, like I said, for him to be a mentally unfit president, this just proves it. I mean, they did come forward and sit there and say about, well, Mr. President, he comes in and he doesn't, and the funny part is he doesn't deny this. He walks to a meeting, okay, Pelosi, so you agree to my wall? Hell no, that we had nothing to talk about. You know what that is to me? That is almost like somebody who is going to sit there and pout like a 5-year-old kid in a grocery store somewhere, and is going to pout because he doesn't get his Fruit Loops. He's basically that kid, but he's a kid with power. That's what's going to mess everything up, and that's what honestly is tearing it. And honestly, that's what's really messing us up as a country is just that he doesn't care about border security. I mean, honestly, he doesn't care about anything that doesn't make him money. And it's always funny where people say Trump is such a great businessman. Well, yeah, if you consider the fact that he's ran every business he ever had to the ground, the fact that every time he goes back to his Mar-a-Lago hotel/home, we're paying him to go. You understand, we are paying him to go home. In the same sense, like NBC paid to get rid of Megyn Kelly and gave her entire $69 million contract. Only in America do you get paid just so they can get rid of you. That's kind of sad. But again, going back to more about the fallout, like I said, what I want to concentrate more today about, the stories that we're hearing about from this shutdown, because it's not just the simple fact of the matter is that only in a shutdown do Social Security benefits still get paid, because Social Security is not really considered a separate entity of the government, but they still make their payments. And of course, if you believe the bullshit about the IRS going to be making tax refund payments, which I don't, because there's really no information to say that, the IRS has yet to confirm this information. But senators and representatives still get paid. They still get paid their $174,000 and up a year salary. $174,000. Let's be honest, 50% of Americans' income is nowhere near that amount. And you're telling me that these people who work for the government are still getting paid for a government shutdown, while government workers are about to now go into their 4th week of not getting a paycheck. Something's fucked up about that. Like, it was me, and if I'm in power, I'm like, okay, the first one I'm going to submit is just that when the government gets shut down, our pay and benefits get cut off too. And of course, it'll be interesting to see how many people vote against their own, to see how many senators and representatives vote against their own interests, because they've raised their pay actually 5 times in the last year. So a lot of them are actually making a lot more than the base salary of $174,000. Or if you're Mitch McConnell, you're basically pimping your own state to be a millionaire, while your state's one of the poorest in the 50 states we have. Anyway, but again, you people are wondering, like I said, how is the shutdown affecting people? Well, sort of like this.
Bureau, just as farmers are beginning to feel the impact of the government shutdown. About $9.5 billion in federal aid was set aside to help farmers across the country weather the trade dispute with China. Those federal aid checks are now on hold. Dean Reynolds is in Polk City, Iowa, who spoke to a farmer who needs help after the price of his crops dropped by 20%.
Aaron Lehman is not a federal employee, he's an Iowa farmer. But the government shutdown has put him in a real bind. This is our soybeans. Typically this time of year we'll go in just to check them, make sure they're not spoiling or they're staying in good condition. You're not kidding. Yeah. It's a 30-foot bin. When it's full, it holds about 10,000 bushels. Lehman has watched the price of his soybeans drop 20% since last summer when the Trump administration got into a fight over trade with China. So the price drop-off on soybeans together with the government shutdown is like a double whammy. It really is. It got us coming and going. This adds just another layer of uncertainty. Oh, absolutely. We rely on our USDA folks. The government shutdown means farmers are sort of flying blind, lacking the supply and demand information that the now closed Agriculture Department would be providing them and allowing them to plan ahead. In 3 months, these dusty fields should be filled with crops, but how much to plant, no one is really sure. The government was in the midst of subsidizing farmers for lost markets in China. The payments were suspended when the government shut down. That sounds not too bad. A farmer for 25 years, Lehman wonders how it's come to this. It's not worth putting up the well to put us in this situation. It's just over 1,000 miles from his Polk City acres to Washington, D.C., but the reverberations from the border wall stalemate are hitting him hard. We're used to weather factors being out of our control. We try to deal with those as best we can. The patience runs thin for farmers, and it seems like there are crises or something that can be completely avoided. That makes no sense. It really makes farmers exasperated. And they are not alone. For CBS This Morning, Dean Reynolds, Polk City, Iowa.
So again, that's like one of the. So again, that's just one story. And again, you have to remember that the farmers were actually bailed out because the tax package, the tax pass bill that Trump had signed into place was pretty much to protect his votes, which was again part of the government. And since the government is shut down, those payments have not been made. And honestly, that's just one of the few stories. Like for example, this one, like I said, well, we're talking about people who are literally trying to find the best way to get along, and when you hear stories like this, it's just horrible.
People got paid during the shutdown. Julie Clark, for instance, is a park ranger in Northern California, but her side business is cleaning windows. It's now her only source of income, she says. She's worried about defaulting on her student loans. Lasika Parrott of the Bureau of Land Management, she's a single mom who's down to her last $800. They both watched the president's speech with Carter Evans and say they did not get the message that they were hoping for.
Yeah, I was hoping. I was like, oh, they're going to put us back to work tomorrow. That's what I was hoping to hear. To be honest, I mean, maybe I'm living in a dream world, but it seems even more polarized than I could have imagined.
It's gotten worse.
I think so. Yeah.
We all have to make compromises with each other throughout our daily lives with our boss, our partner. It seems like the government should be a great example of that, and they just don't seem to come together right now.
Do you feel like you're stuck in the middle of this? Do you feel like you're being used?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like a pawn in a game that I don't agree with. But yeah, I definitely feel stuck, and there's absolutely nothing I can do about it.
I'm pretty resilient, but I do not like being in this position, and I feel almost like I'm being punished for something that I didn't do.
In California, an Air Force veteran was raped, murdered, and beaten to death with a hammer.
He told some pretty awful stories. Agreed.
You can see where he's coming from.
Yeah, I just don't feel like it's to hold the country hostage. I don't buy it that has to happen. That, he gets to hold the country hostage to get this.
At your expense.
At my expense, yeah. At all of our expense. It's all the single moms that are struggling and going, oh my God, what am I going to do?
It seems like now people have dug their heels in. And
what I hope is that they can both come together and have a valuable compromise, and that includes us going back to work.
What a fascinating discussion here in Colorado, speaking with federal workers in Arcadia, California.
So that's actually just one area of just people, and they watched the speech. I mean, you got to think that that's just one. And honestly, it's almost on the lines of where you really will see people, like I said, if you depend on the government for your paycheck that's no longer available, the reality of it all is it's how do you deal? It's how do you survive, honestly. So if you're really looking at it, it's almost like this young man's story.
Put people back to work.
Look what's happened right here. They forgot about the American worker.
I work at the Smithsonian National Zoo. I've been there for 5 years. I have been out of work since December 31st, and my last check was January the 4th.
Because our government has failed to protect the interests of the American workers and their families.
It's very stressful. I'm trying to negotiate my bills, my utility bills, my rent, my phone, and my Medicaid and food stamps, to worry about where your food's going to come from, where your shelter's going to come from, whether your bills are going to get turned down. I had a bill for $140, and I had to call Pepco and negotiate with them to try to send them some type of payment, so I split it in half and gave them $70. My rent is $800, so I had to call my landlady and let her know that I had been furloughed and that I wouldn't be able to pay half of it. She agreed, and she wasn't too happy about it, but I told her that's the way it is, and I can't do no better.
I can't relate.
Yes, I am.
Make it justice. They always do.
They get taken care of better than we are. Let's say, for example, the handles. They get the traction in, they got a roof on their head, they get taken care of very properly, they get medical treatment. You got handles there, but your people are just as important as the handles.
So a lot of them agree with what I do.
I blame Donald Trump for it because he's the one that said he wanted a shutdown.
I am proud to shut down the government for border security, Jeff.
And this is the situation, the mess that we in. President Trump, please have some compassion for the American worker.
I will be the one to shut it up.
Please stop your demagoguery.
We want security. We want common sense.
Stop this foolishness about a stupid wall that's not going to do anything for anybody. You promised that you was going to help the American workers and give them jobs.
We're going to defend the American worker.
You got just the opposite.
So basically, guys, I mean, it's literally a there you have it situation. It's almost along the lines of just, it's how in the world can an individual honestly sit there and say he's for the American people. And like I said, I mean, we can keep going. Honestly, we can honestly keep going on with these stories. I mean, I don't really want to get really too far into them, but understand those stories are just one of many stories out there that are like that. So it's amazing to me that, when people are wondering, what are we going to do in order to get past all this? And it's very simple. It's coming to terms with the simple fact of the matter is that, yes, there needs to be an end to this. And because people themselves are feeling it all over the place. I mean, like I said, I just want to show 2 stories. Technically, I found 5 stories I want to do, but I didn't want to let it drag on because you guys are getting the point. I hope you guys are getting the point that there are a lot of people out there struggling trying to make bills work with the money they have, and you have people in Congress who don't have to worry about anything. And that's the problem, which I do hope that changes the new Congress. I'm kind of hoping it does. But anyway, there's other stuff we wanted to cover as well. For example, the Obamacare. Just when you thought Obamacare was safe. How can I put this ever so nicely? Obamacare, for all those that don't remember, is basically the reason why you have insurance. That's right. It isn't, and I will be honest, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Obamacare is not a perfect system. let me stress that heavily again. Obamacare is not a perfect system. But, and I say but all the while, because in its sense with Obamacare and the way it's working now, I mean, it is to a point, and I know people are going to argue with me, but I'm paying more than what I was beforehand, and this, that, and the other. Okay, I already hear the argument. What I'm basically saying is just that it's not a perfect system, but it did open the door on what I hope to get to will be universal health care. I'm hoping it will. Now, will it get that far? Maybe. But if for all those, like I said, the ruling Obamacare is kind of this, and if you don't know about it by now, you should. So here's what's actually going on with that. Hoping it plays. We already had his shouting issues today. I'm hoping this plays. It needs to play. Come on. You're going to play. We hope. Okay.
May be going back to the Supreme Court after a federal judge ruled the entire law unconstitutional. Friday's ruling follows the Republican tax overhaul that changed Obama's individual mandate by removing the tax penalty for people who are uninsured. The Texas judge ruled the law cannot stand without it.
If the decision is upheld, it would eliminate protections for nearly 20 million Americans who are insured through Obamacare. Now, that could upset the entire health care system. The Kaiser Family Foundation estimates that 27% of adults under 65 have pre-existing conditions that could leave them uninsurable. CBS News business analyst Joe Schlesinger is here with what the ruling could mean for your health insurance. Okay, first, let's talk about those who are covered by the Affordable Care Act.
The most important thing to note is your coverage is intact. This does not change anything for 2019. If you enrolled, you went through that window which closed on Saturday for the vast majority of states, you got your coverage. There are 11 states and the District of Columbia. They have different programs. They have their own state exchanges. Those each have their own deadlines for enrollment. So if you are considering that, don't listen to this and say, oh, I shouldn't enroll. You absolutely should enroll. Again, coverage intact for 2019.
Because this legal fight could go on for years. What about those who are covered through work or private insurance and specifically have pre-existing conditions?
This is the big concern. And again, don't freak out just yet. We don't know how this is going to turn out. It will likely end up in the Supreme Court. But the thing about Obamacare is that there were two aspects of it. It had mandated that everyone should be able to get a health insurance, and that if you had a pre-existing condition, you couldn't be treated differently. And so now, if this is ruled unconstitutional, if it's dismantled, it's not the 20 million or so who have Obamacare who are impacted. It is also the folks who have pre-existing conditions. A healthcare expert I spoke with yesterday said to me his big concern is that because these changes are looming, people are really going to start freaking out about it, and they shouldn't yet, but this is a big concern.
Well, one of the other things that people forget about Obamacare as well is that it mandated that insurance cover lots of preventative care.
That's exactly
for children, for women, for lots of other expanded coverage in terms of the insurance umbrella.
And with all those different things that had to be covered, and you know, it's a list is lengthy. The other idea here is that if those things aren't covered, maybe we go back to a pre-Affordable Care Act era where people are not covered for as much. But not only that, we could see this actually dramatically impact people, especially with small employers. And these smaller plans are not going to be as expansive. I don't think it'll be as dramatic for the larger employers.
We also see that sign-ups for the ACA are down 12%. How's that affecting things?
Well, I think this is a big problem because especially in those 11 states in D.C., they want enrollments up. Part of the problem is a slightly shorter period, not as much advertising. And I think that this has really conspired to create a bit of a difficult situation. On the upside, some states had expanded Medicaid, so some people fell in under that. But again, this is an incredibly important issue. I don't want to make everybody nuts about it because there's nothing to do today, but it is really going to impact millions of people.
So quickly, we know that a lot of state attorneys generals are already appealing. What happens next?
So now this winds its way through the court system, and as one lawyer said to me,
I don't know how John Roberts is going to wake up the morning that case comes to him, but we know that the Chief Justice had ruled in favor of the large portion of the Affordable Care Act when the previous case got to the Supreme Court. We don't know yet. Again, important issue. Everyone, please do get your coverage if you are still eligible for your enrollment period. Jill, thank you.
So basically, guys, in so many words, the problem with healthcare is this. The rest of the world is figuring it out. We need a single payer system. So for those that don't know what a single payer system is, this is pretty much a streamlined form where honestly there is no other competition. A majority of things are actually paid. Pre-existing conditions are covered, and everyone is covered. As long as you're a citizen of said country, you're covered. The problem with single payer systems is that it virtually eliminates competition and healthcare profits. It's very creepy that I sit there and say, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, healthcare in the U.S. is a for-profit business, and that's the problem. Because there's more money in the management of a condition than the cure. Chris Rock said that. There's more money in the management than there is in the cure. There's more money in the pain, unmanaging the pain, versus actually stopping the pain. So it's interesting where people are going to sit there and say, well, I paid more under Obamacare than I did without it. Okay, but here's the problem. You're blaming the single individual, a single president who came up with the idea of covering everybody, but at the same time, you're not going to blame the healthcare companies who are listening to their shareholders and executives and raising prices. I'm just saying. Like I've said before, when the ACA law went into place, and people were like, well, my premiums are going up, and I won't be able to afford, $800 to $1,000 a month. That's your insurance companies. Your insurance companies will always bullshit the lie about, oh, well, they're raising the cost on us, so we have to raise up to you. That's trickle-down bullshit. That's them kicking down the cost eventually to you, the same way it's done to us in taxes. They can sit there and say all the time that, oh, well, we got to pay this, i.e., you have to pay this. Because don't ever expect a politician to turn around and say when they're going to pay something, the government's going to pay it. No. The government's going to have you pay it. That's usually how it works. But in the sense of Obamacare, which by now has been, honestly, Obamacare has been in the Supreme Court so many times, you would think they would look at it and just go, no, we're done. We're not going to keep going back to it. Because let's be honest, both sides will lawyer the shit out of it, and it's ruled constitutional. It's also ruled constitutional, and the only reason it's actually going back now. We thought the whole thing with Obamacare was over and done with. But the only reason, like I said, it's going back now is because the mandate has been removed, which a lot of people thought it was, which a lot of people were like, well, I don't want to get taxed for not having insurance. Okay, but understand the Republicans are the one that had that put in. Initially, the initial ACA law that was put in did not have that. It did not have that taxation penalty added. It was added as a compromise from the Republican side because they still have to answer to insurance companies. No different from the Democrats before y'all start. But the thing about it is, once they remove that mandate, because that's what Trump wanted to do, undo everything the black guy did, and once that happened, then again, made open season for them to go back and say, hey, we don't want Obamacare. And then all it takes is one federal judge somewhere to go, I rule it unconstitutional. And we start the whole lawyer cycle again. So really all this does is put a lot of people in danger of not having coverage. And let's be honest, these days you need to have coverage, especially just for the many, many things that can actually happen, especially when the FDA done lost half its inspectors, so you better hope that kale doesn't take you out. But another thing which I just found awkward and crazy and just above all this is this article I found, where an evangelical group wants the gays removed from the anti-lynching bill. So the funny thing is, there's a Justice of Victims of Lynching Act, which basically makes lynching a hate crime, as if it already should be a hate crime. So there's a nonprofit out there called Liberty Counsel that literally wants the wording to be labeled I'm sorry, let me try it again. They want the act that's basically being put into Congress right now to basically remove gender, gender, gay, LGBT issues. They want that removed from the bill because they believe, and I cannot make this up, because they believe that if they slip this in there, that means that it's open season, which is interesting that they say open season because they've been trying to pass this bill. But the thing about it is, if you and by doing this, anybody that's gay or transgender or anything of that nature gets attacked, then yes, it is pretty much considered a hate crime. And of course, hate crimes are federal crimes. And the Liberty Council, which is also considered a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, has turned around and sat there and said, yeah, they're pretty much trying to make it okay for you to stone gays because, as much as I talk about religious people, there are a lot of good people out there who are religious and are great, wonderful people to be around. It's just the small majority. I like to call them extremely religious crazy nuts. Religious nuts. There we go. Religious nuts. Religious nuts tend to take Bible passages to the extreme, and they believe that it all should be included in our laws, even though we're a nation of many religions and deities and things of that nature, and we apparently for a few of these religious nuts, they just can't accept there's just more than one. Shocker. But it's crazy about that to where it's like you think we could, for all religions to say, live and let be. We always seem to have this. We always seem to have this one thing about, I'm gonna live and let be, but at the same time, no, you're still gonna follow my way, which is weird as shit, but also crazy. So another thing that I want to talk about, because I know, like I said, sorry guys, because of the technical difficulties we had earlier, we really didn't get started the way we wanted to. But thank you guys for still all watching. So here's my thing, and I was like, I'm gonna tell this. Let me actually play this first before I actually get into my rant about this one, because this is another subject that's near and dear to my heart. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The teachers are pretty much saying school's out until you do some demands. Now, here's the thing about this, and I've said before. There's a big ass thing about, and it's like if you've had great teachers in your life, I was lucky enough to have great educators in my life who've actually impacted me and helped me become the person I am. I'm forever grateful for that. It is amazing to me where an educator, much like a 911 responder, much like all 911 responders, not just in the call centers, fire, police, things of that nature, they don't get paid the way they should. EMTs, also EMTs as well, I apologize. But they don't really get paid the way they should be paid. For example, an educator makes, an educator in Tennessee actually makes anywhere from $38,000 to $45,000 a year starting out. Think about that. $38,000 to $45,000 a year, and you're a teacher. You literally have the one position to where you affect a lot of lives. Not only do you affect a lot of lives, you have the ability to make an impact on a lot of lives. And $45,000 a year on the high side isn't covering it. And that's just in public schools. And that's the reason why the public school systems, if I was them, yeah, I would all go on strike. Because these teachers need to be paid. Teachers need to be paid to where they can actually do their job. Because the one thing that I keep on harping about, 1984 by Orson Welles, if you never read it, you should read it. Because 1984 is if it is not page for page what's going on in this country is right now. Because if you destabilize the educational system, i.e. don't pay teachers and teachers have to struggle, then the education is lost on children. Children grow up and then don't become very productive adults. And those adults affect other things. It's a cycle. But I do believe in education because a good education can change a child's life. But also at the same time, give the teachers what they fucking need. I mean, give them a raise, give them funding for supplies. So you know why? I said, you want to know where it's gotten to? It's gotten to where teachers are sending a supply list home with their with the students, and then you got parents in Walmart looking around like, why do they need all this crap? I mean, all I needed back then was just a set of crayons, set of pencils, a notebook paper, and that's it. Everything else was provided by the school, but it's not anymore because again, education across states has been cut and keeps getting cut. It's almost like the first thing bill. Like, I'll be honest, I'll use Nashville for an example. Nashville has cut their education bill so bad, but we have to have a soccer stadium. Now, do not get me wrong, for those that are fans of the Major League Soccer team that we're getting, I'm sure it's cool. I'm sure it's great. It's just in my mind, every time I've seen, like, okay, something new gets built, like Adelphia Coliseum, which is now considered Nissan Coliseum. We built that. At the same time, that money could have went to our education. We built the Sounds a new stadium, First Tennessee baseball stadium. Again, another high venture could have went to education. We built the Music City Center. That was almost $1 billion in itself. We built the structure because nobody wanted to go to the National Convention Center anymore, which is now being remodeled as something else. Again, money that could have been put toward education. And now there's a soccer team that's wanting a soccer stadium built. Again, I understand that Nashville is a tourist town. Nashville is basically 80% of its income comes from tourism. Everybody wants to come here. Now it seems everybody wants to move here because as you see, prices start going up. The thing that I don't understand is just that if you have all this going around, why is it that more money isn't being shoveled into education to help these teachers? Because what's happening out in Los Angeles isn't too far from where it's going to happen everywhere else. I still hope it happens in Nashville one day. But it's the whole thing about it is pay the teachers. Because you want to know why public education is dropping out so bad? Easy. Because parents are deciding to put their children in private schools, charter schools, academies, areas to where the education is better because teachers are paid more. And let's be honest, if the teachers are paid more to be well off, the education improves. However, it's kind of hard to do that if you're trying to figure out how you're going to, how do you teach an overcrowded classroom and every student learns differently? Public schools failing, and yet at the same time, most of these can think about is how to expand and bring in money. Not forgetting the fact of the matter is you have to teach children because, like I said, public education is one of those things in life. Now, don't get me wrong. If you got to go to a private school or a private academy or any of that nature, not knocking you, because I'm pretty sure your folks or you paid a penny or a scholarship, what have you. If you got in, you got the education you need, great. I'm speaking from the side of public education to where public education needs a you know what? Public education needs to be treated like the wall, in a way. Except we should be giving $5 billion to education, not $5 billion to a baby orange. But speaking of the wall, which is kind of funny, where Trump talked about border security, I thought this was interesting as shit. That he keeps on saying that drugs get smuggled across the border, right? Although they do come in through every, legal point of entry. But here's the funny thing that I found about, like I said, Trump's so worried about cocaine smuggling through a wall, probably needs to look at these two. Yeah. Now that's crazy. Now, if you really think about that right there, that is crazy. They literally pulled an American gangster and got greedy. You went from 22, you successfully transported 22 pounds of cocaine, and then you figured, what the hell, let's swing for the fences, and got caught. And Trump wants to turn around and sit there and say, well, this is the problem? This is the problem? And I just want to sit there and just go, it's almost on the lines of just like, the war on drugs is actually bullshit. I've always said that best. Because here's the thing about the war on drugs. The war on drugs only occurs because people do want something that's considered illegal and out there and forbidden, and folks will still find a way to get to it. And hence, because they're finding a way to get to it, the price goes up. So, happened in Prohibition with moonshine and cigarettes. So, it's interesting now to where it's like, okay, they always say, well, moonshine's not illegal, just pay the taxes on it. And of course, what do people start doing? Paying their taxes, and therefore you're able to sell moonshine. And the funny part about that is, the moment it is legal and you pay taxes on it, it's almost like the crime that goes with it disappears. So imagine if weed were legal across all 50 states. The level of crime would drop because you would be too high to do something stupid. Personally, you'd be too high to. Some people get so high they'd be lucky to find the floor. But again, it's one of those things to where they can't sit there and say that the problem is across the borders when you have army personnel using military assets to transfer drugs. It kind of says a lot. But anyway, it's one of those things where I just wanted to say it's interesting as all get out. It's better I could put that. Because every time I've read that story, I'm like, that's pretty much Frank Grimes. I'm pretty much waiting for Denzel Washington's character to come out somewhere. But another thing I want to sit there and talk about, which I find interesting, like I said, interesting things, was this actual video I found. So let it play for itself. That says a lot, doesn't it? But so the fact of the matter, and that's the reason why I wanted to bring that up, is because people always sit there and talk about, well, if you only budget your money, if you budget your money, if you do this, and budgeting is right. Budgeting is a part of it. But the one discussion that no one seems to have is just that we are honestly not being paid enough, and our bills and expenditures are getting higher every year. So it's like what they always say, everything's higher but the paycheck. Well, in this case, it's true because it's one of those things to where you can literally sit there and say, well, you make this much a year, you should be doing better. And I look at them and I'm like, well, yeah, but at the same time, this is what you pay. For example, it's like you look at the rent. I'm like the rent or mortgage took the majority of the paycheck. Again, I'll use Nashville as an example. Nashville's getting higher on prices. So for a lot of us who are not making, and I'll be honest, if let's just say around about your 60 grand and below, okay, which could be a lot of Nashville, honestly, 60 grand and below as far as our incomes go. If it's 60 grand and below that you're making a year, and your rent is anywhere from $900 to let's say $900 to $1,300 a month. That means that a significant amount of your money will be put toward your rent, or if you have a house. And like I said, with cars and things and whatnot, it can just add up. What did you say, Angie? Those prices were exaggerated, but I get the point. Well, it's only doing an average because, like I said, it's going by. It's not saying pertaining to you, but it is making a point that if you are spending more in gas, then that's going to add up. Especially if you have a gas guzzler, or you have a truck, or you have a van, or if you have kids, or if you're driving from one spot to another. If it's not just simply going from home to work and maybe going out to eat and all that kind of crap, it's probably different. But it makes the point of just about, when it really comes down to it, Americans are not being paid enough. It's almost like, and it's like in most cases, some Americans have a full-time job and a part-time job just to make ends meet, and sometimes that could be two people living together just trying to keep a roof above their heads. Because, like I said, with utilities, phones, insurance, things of that nature, because everything's going up higher, it almost feels like every year just feels like we're not getting ahead because, honestly, our wages have stagnated and then have yet to be raised up. But that's, like I said, using an example of just those that are 6,000 below, because let's be honest, because I looked this up before I started this podcast, because I'm always curious, because if you ever looked up your city and you ever looked up to see the average income to, like in this case, I'll use this example, and you can do this for yourself if you want to. Google the average living income to live in your said city. Okay, so I'll use mine for example. I Googled, the average income for living in Nashville, Tennessee. And it never ceases to amaze me how high it freaking gets. Because right now, last year, it was actually at $68,000 a year. It is now at $85,000 a year. And that's accounting if you have a house, 2 cars, 3 kids, insurance, and the whole 9 yards. 85 grand to live. 85 grand, which was a big ass jump from the 70,000 plus that was last year. So again, it would be nice to have an 85K job, but not too many of us have those. Some of us, like I said, are still below the 60,000 underline. But again, that's one of those things to where it just needs to be addressed about wages. And of course, universal basic income, which is another story we'll go into another day, because that's literally a subject in itself. But again, just a good idea to know that this is pretty much a lot of the path that people are into. So I always find it interesting when people go, well, if you just learn to budget your money better, you'd be better off. Might want to look into that before you actually start that holier than thou shit. That's all I'm saying. But also another thing I found, another subject I wanted to talk about was basically this one here, which I'll let the story explain itself.
Morning, because Jeremy Capel says this was his worst nightmare. With an honest love that he says he mixed words during his forecast by simply talking too fast. Well, now he's fighting back against those who say otherwise.
It's a nice day when
A typical day at the office, gone terribly, terribly wrong.
the way I looked out at Martin Luther King Jr. Park.
Jeremy Capel, the chief meteorologist at NBC affiliate WHEC in Rochester, New York, was trying to pronounce the name of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he seemed to utter a racial slur that has historically been used towards black people.
Clear, calm, and cooling.
Capel says he stumbled in speaking quickly, combining King and Jr., and didn't realize what that sounded like to some.
2 words mashed together incorrectly. What I said was not even a word, it was a sound. And people, I believe, read into that.
Nobody addressed the slip-up on air when it happened Friday, but after outrage grew online over the weekend, late Sunday, the station fired Capel.
Meteorologist Jeremy Capel is no longer with News 10 NBC.
Rochester Mayor Lovely Warren saying station management only took action after the station was shamed into doing so by a backlash on social media. Capel and his wife Lisa released an apology on Facebook.
There was no
No.
For him to get called a racist, it's just, it makes me very sad. I was sickened. We teach our children the message of loving others.
And while critics online are calling Kappel's mistake both racist and willful, he's also receiving a wave of support, including a Change.org petition to get him back on the air. This is ridiculous, wrote one Twitter user. I'm a bleeding heart liberal and I could see that this was just a flub. Hope you get an even better job. Kappel says he was never given a chance to publicly apologize.
Of course, I don't harbor any racist thoughts. They're not thinking through. Why on earth a guy of almost 20 years in this profession who's never been accused of anything like this before, why would I all of a sudden try to slip that in there? I don't get it.
Overnight, WHEC released a statement to NBC News saying, in part, since our decision to terminate his employment, this station has been caught in the middle of a vitriolic political debate. We believe we've done what is all right for our station and our community, and will continue to take a strong stand for our personal and professional values.
Well, you know what the TV station thinks, you know what he thinks. What do people in the community think about this whole thing?
It's hard to say where public opinion stands right now, but I have to say when I spoke to Jeremy last night on the phone, he said, look, where is the humanity in all of this social media reaction? Which I think raises an even more pertinent question, right? What does the path to redemption look like if and when people make mistakes like this? And what's interesting, when I looked back at the tape, this exact same flub over the exact same words has happened with 3 other on-air talent in the past, relatively recent past. 2 of them got to keep their jobs after they issued a public apology, and that's what Jeremy said he wanted to, a chance to issue a formal public apology.
Well, anyone who's done this, as long as we've done it, on air, you flub. You make mistakes. Yeah. It would seem as if the guy made a genuine mistake, but, that's just...
Morgan, wow. Thank you very much. It's an interesting...
So, pretty much, guys, so the meteorologist decided that, which I went back and watched it. I actually went back and watched it 4 or 5 times. The fact that here's the problems I have with this. Okay. I'm not an on-air talent. I mean, yeah, I'm on air as far as being on Facebook and whatnot. I always acknowledge that, yes, I will probably use language that is not very PC. I've also sat there and said I'm going to speak the truth regardless, whether it's for or against, it has to be said. It's interesting to where in his case, to where if you said Martin Luther Coon, and I've been like, I'm a white guy that just sat there and said coon. Let me stop on air and go, I apologize. That was not what I wanted to say. Let me rephrase it and go from there. So, again, it's one of those things to where I go, that's one, because he kept going. He kept going. I was like, first of all, he kept going about it. He didn't stop himself. It didn't dawn on his head like, I just said coon. Then the first offense was it didn't really say anything. What really came out was a sound. No, coon came out. You don't coon no. Coon is not a sound. Coon is a word. Which I thought that was kind of bullshit. And then he goes the full, I have never been accused of this. I have never did anything of this nature. I have not did all this. And goes on this tirade. And that's when I started thinking, maybe the news station got this right. I mean, I understand that sometimes you want to be able to tell your side of the story, you want to be able to tell what happened, but if you really think about this man's chain of actions, didn't stop himself when he first said it, didn't just fess up to him like, you know what, I did say it, I didn't mean to say it, I should have apologized on there the moment it said it. His actions, honestly, and this could just be me, his actions reminded me of someone who maybe does harbor those tendencies, but when called out upon them, immediately defensive, when he should be immediately understanding. It's like, you know what? Yes, I said it. I didn't mean to say it. It was the wrong thing to say. I apologize. That's simply not me. Because you know why? And I'm going to be honest with you. Had he said the word faggot, the LGBTQ community would have rode him through the mud. Because he said coon, understandably, in the political climate that we are, The news station did the best thing they could, and which honestly, if you really think about it, they turned around and got rid of him. Now, honor your talents flub. This is true, but at the same time, his actions afterward is where I have the problem with it. Because he could have sat, because honestly, he could have sat there and said, well, I said it. I didn't mean to say it. I'm extremely sorry. This is not who I am. And, if he's willing to go that mile to prove it, then okay, there's forgiveness on that part. But if you come out and you say the word and you're immediately, if you're immediately defensive, that's kind of a red flag in my opinion, because that tells me, there's something there that you just don't want to talk about. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting, and I want to know what your guys' opinions about that are, because people can sit there and say, well, it's a flub, he should be forgiven. I'm like, well, and other people have been like, oh, fuck that, he needs to be fired, which of course he was. So it's just interesting, you guys, what do you say, Angie? How did the mashup of Keen and Junior sound like Coon? I said the same thing. BJ, what do you say? They can budget these hands. It's how I can't argue that, BJ, at all. But as we're about to wind down, guys, like I said, I know earlier we got held up by technical difficulties, guys. So thank you all, guys, who are still watching. So we're gonna do some feel good news. Like I always said best. I know every podcast that I've done, it seems to be some doom and gloom. It's always about bad shit, and it's always about things that are sometimes funny, sometimes sad, sometimes like, oh my god. So what I decided to do here at How the Frack We Got Here is that I always want to leave things on a positive note, because we all need positivity going forward in this world. So that's all I'm for. So this first video, which I'm glad I found this, I'm finally glad it plays, but this one's actually about Matthew Charles. So if you don't know who Matthew Charles is, here you go.
On home. He was like, Judge Charles signed your release this morning. Like that, right? I was like, wow. And
just wow, or did you go wow?
I was like, I did my thumbs up, not thumbs up, but my fist up, told everybody I was in the 8-man pod. I was like, I'm leaving, I'm going home, but she didn't know whether it was going to be that day or the following day. And I'm still trying to process all of this, and I'm excited, and some of it's unbelievable still, you know what I mean? Because it just, today I just got this motion 2 days ago, and nothing in the federal system goes that fast.
Now, if you don't know who Matthew Charles is, so let me go ahead and explain that story. Matthew Charles, out of everybody, this man did go to jail for selling cocaine. He went to jail. He was actually sentenced to jail for 25 years. Was a model inmate for 10 years. Never had a directional duty. Never had a incident write up. No issues with other cellmates. Perfect model inmate, as they call it. Under President Obama's law about releasing lessened offenders, since he served the majority of his sentence, that immediately, because of a clerical error, freed him early. The problem is he was actually freed early and has been free for almost 5 to 6 years. Unfortunately, because there's some douche at the prison records that decided, oh, wait a minute, that individual got out too early. He actually wasn't supposed to get out at all. What did they do? They turned around and told this man, who has been freed for 5 to 6 years, although he served 10 to 15 years of his life of his sentence already, was told that he had to go back to prison because he did not qualify for the law, because he was retroactive before the law became into effect. So you're going to stand and tell me that a man of 5 to 7 years who's been free, who's been a productive member of society, who has done everything that he's supposed to do, and is actually trying to turn his life around, is now being told that he now has to report back to prison, which he did. Thankfully, they turned around. Thankfully, some actual justice had kicked in and said, you know what, this needs to happen. This man does not deserve to be here. He's obviously a changed man. Leave him, and of course, sign his release papers, which. I love the fact that I didn't get the whole interview. I apologize, but I love the fact that when he sat there and said, "It's hard not to be angry, but I have to learn to be patient." And he really did. I mean, and it kind of went into the whole thing about his faith, finding God and trusting in Him. And like I said, that's all well and good. I can't knock that, but that man had a strength, and that's why I love reading those types of stories, because that honestly, that man had a strength that I was just like, I was amazed by. Like, he wasn't mad, he wasn't bitter, he was not. I mean, literally everything opposite. He was just grateful, thankful to be out. And I gotta think that it takes a strong guy. It takes a strong man to sit there and be like, after all that shit that's happened to him, that the only thing he's thankful for is that he could be with his folks again. And I had to give it to him. I said I was so happy when he got out, because honestly, there's a lot of low level offenders who are not hardened criminals that don't need to be in jail. And I'm glad this dude got out. And dang it, BJ, you're killing me, because I was actually going to play that story for all those that don't know, but I'm pretty sure if you've been following Facebook or the news, then you probably already know this little tidbit.
Today for a Tennessee woman whose life sentence has grabbed national headlines. The governor of Tennessee has just commuted Centoya Brown's sentence. She has served 15 years in prison for killing a man who paid to have sex with her when she was just 16 years young. The circumstances surrounding her case ignited this national outcry. Brown was tried and convicted as an adult and required to serve at least 51 years before she could even be considered for parole. CNN's Martin Savage is here with the details of Brown's release. And so, Martin, last couple of days here, the governor said, I'm freeing you.
Right, remarkable over here. Bill Hassan only has a couple more days as governor of Tennessee, but he took this out. Many people have lobbied on behalf of this young woman for quite a long time, including political celebrities, Hollywood celebrities, and many who just said, look, this is a classic case of a young woman who was a victim of a crime, sex trafficking, and then who commits a crime, but that the circumstances under which she was living or which she had been raised had not been taken fully into account here. So now she goes from one other life sentence to getting parole. Doesn't start right away. She won't be released until August of this year. It will be exactly 15 years. But many people say also her life behind bars was exemplary too. The way that she got a GED, that she got her associate's degree. She's almost about to get her bachelor's degree. She really turned her life around. Here's what her attorneys, how they reacted.
We're up here to say thank you to everybody here and everybody around the world who has been involved in pleading for, praying for the release of Centoya Brown.
Her story, though, is a story that should be a catalyst for a lot of others, thousands of other juveniles. We need to see this as a national awakening to change the draconian laws that allow juveniles, children, to be placed in adult prisons when they're just children. They're not little adults.
Centoya Brown released her own statement, and I'll just read you a very brief part of it. She said, with God's help, I am committed to live the rest of my life helping others, especially young people. My hope is to help other young girls avoid ending up where I have been. And that is a tremendous commitment to make.
And that part itself is honestly cool. Now, I do understand, because I know from previous conversations with folks, that Centoya Brown is a hot topic, because a lot of people believe that, well, she should be in jail because, she was trying to rob them and things of that nature. And despite your opinion, I've always been on the lines of, I look at where she's been. Because here's the thing about it. If a grown man goes to a 16-year-old kid and basically offers them, and basically pays to have sex with them, and she's basically sold into this lifestyle, which nobody's ever going to sit there and argue about Centoya Brown. Like, she was actually sold into this lifestyle, being a sex slave, and that she just wasn't going to do it. But the negative side of things, which of course there's plenty of places around here that actually will sit there and talk about this, saying, oh, well, she got what she deserved. And I'm like, well, no, she really didn't. She was a 16-year-old that was tried as an adult and literally had the book thrown at her, in my opinion, because she's not white. Because if a white woman had did what she did and murdered a white man, she would have never gotten the the most maximum penalty that you can display upon a person, which is basically taking their life away, 51 years in prison, she would have honestly been in her 70s before she was eligible for parole. Which is interesting to where, like I said, it's one of those things to where, yes, there is inequality. There is inequality. There is injustice in the judicial courts. Mainly put because when Antonio Brown's first story first came out, everybody was just so focused on the fact of, well, she just brought this upon herself. So you're going after the person who's the victim? I mean, because really, are we really going to blame the man who knew probably her age and still wanted to fuck her anyway? So you're not going to blame the man for his attention, but you're going to blame the woman. And yet, so many people don't understand how this relates to R. Kelly, which again, that's a whole other subject that I will go into in a different podcast. But for this one, guys, it's just the whole thing of honestly just I am glad that she's released. What they didn't say was that she's gonna be on. What they didn't say was that she's gonna be on 10 years probation. She is gonna get released in August, which I don't understand that. That to me just sounds like bullshit. Because clemency, for all those that don't know, clemency is pretty much saying, hey, you're not going to serve the rest of your term in prison. That usually means that you're just released. And Bill Haslam, who was actually the governor, because he was the one that's getting pressure to release it because he's actually going to be leaving because Bill Frist, oh, that hurts to say that. Bill Frist is actually going to be the next Tennessee governor in the next coming days. So Haslam decided to, as one of his final acts, which, I'm glad his ass is finally gone because he has not done shit for Tennessee. But the one thing he actually has done, which was a good thing, was to grant her clemency. Now, the thing that I find bullshit about this is that she's on 10 years probation, and after 10 years probation, she still has to go to some classes. And she pretty much has to jump through hoops. Now, granted, she's not in prison. She won't be in prison, but I said you're still in prison for another 7 months. It's almost like we couldn't get you for the 51 years, but we're gonna still make you wait. Now, I know in her case because she knows she's getting out. Maybe that'll be the easiest. Bill Lee. Thank you, BJ. I said Bill Frist. My bad. Bill Lee is the guy that's gonna become governor. I apologize, BJ. You're right. But it's amazing to me to where Santonia Brown, she might think those 7 months are going to be like the easiest thing she's ever done. But I never understood that why when a person is given that type of clemency, that it takes always so long for them to be released. And I can only think because the CCA headquarters in Tennessee, and they own about 60% of the prisons in the U.S., including the ones in Tennessee. So, hey, we can't get her for 15 years. We can get her for 7 more months. But anyway, she's getting released, and maybe that does. And like the lawyer said, maybe that does lead to juveniles and actually looking back at the way that they're actually being tried. And of course, incarceration, things of that nature need to also change as well. So good for her on that part. Can't be mad. So our final story of good news is that, like I said, talking about the shutdown. With the shutdown, national parks have been closed. However, there are some parks that people still go to where trash is picking up and things of that nature. And because government shutdowns there's no sanitation assistance. So I find it interesting that there's one group of people out there that still want to keep these parks clean.
So within 48 hours, we rallied over 70 of our own Muslim youth, as well as non-Muslim volunteers, to go out to Joshua Tree in California, Cuyahoga in Ohio. We had more volunteers in National Mall in Washington, D.C., in the Everglades, and as well as Independence Hall in Philadelphia. Funding from a charity known as Humanity First USA, we were able to get the trash bags and the gloves and all the resources needed to make sure we had enough resources for ourselves and for the other volunteers who came out. And so we simply went out in trucks and in cars, went right into the parks, and just got to work. Thankfully, there were other groups who have been cleaning up the trash throughout the weeks, yet at the same time people continue to visit, and so the trash keeps overflowing, and unfortunately people keep littering. So we found plenty of trash overflowing in the trash cans, but also unfortunately plenty of litter in the brush, some in the reflecting pool on the National Mall, and just, cigarette butts lying around. We are proud to be Muslim and we are proud to be American, and we're not going to back down from that. So we want to be out there engaging with the public, letting other Americans who don't know us make a Muslim friend. So it's just about reaching out and realizing there's so much more in common than what separates us. And one of those things, which goes across faiths, is that cleanliness is an important part of many faiths out there. So just as is important in Islam, we can go outside and we can help clean up this country together.
Now, the thing about that is, sorry. So, that right there, to me, is possibly one of the most, honestly beautiful things you could ever see. Because, like I said, and the one thing you hear about, when you hear Muslim, these days, Muslims is aligned with terrorism, with violence, things of that nature. That's what I love about this, where I say, you know what? I love the fact that, of course, there are young people, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, are coming together and actually trying to keep these parks clean because, fuckers who keep going through these parks can't seem to keep their own goddamn trash themselves. Keep in mind the parks are still closed. The park services, because although you can't stop people from going into a park, but there's nobody there to actually clean up after people, which is kind of sad. That you have to have grown ass adults go into these national parks and just littering, which makes no sense to me. But I give props to this group. Simply put, because of what they're doing, they are literally sitting there saying, you know what, we are going to step out here and we're going to organize it, regardless if you're Muslim, non-Muslim, any faith is welcome kind of thing. And they're trying to do something positive is amazing to me. And that's the way it should be. That's the way how it should go. Because this is basically showing what individuals can do when they come together. And when you're not trying to basically pass a false narrative. So props to that group as far as them doing that. And like I said, that has made me think that's one of those moments where I sit there and say that is the reason why things of that nature can happen and for the better, and that they should happen for the better. So, like I said, it's one of those things where I said I just love the fact the message that he had is like, you know what, you can come down here and you can either get rid of your xenophobia, or you can come down here and get rid of your xenophobia, make some friends, get to know us, and help us clean up. So it's helpful, it's environmental, it's actually breaking down that barrier, and that's what's actually needed. But we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for this one, guys. Thank you guys for all watching. Thank you, Angie. Thank you, BJ. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, TL. Oh, TL. Thank you, TL. Thank you, Larry, and John. Wow, John, you never watched any of my podcasts before. I'm kind of wondering. It's like I've never seen your name pop up before. But again, sorry, man. But thank you for watching too. So pretty much, guys, some shameless plug before I get out. Before we end the shindig. This is Podcast Saturday, so this is only one of my podcasts. My second podcast will be a little bit later, possibly from 5 to 7 p.m. That's called Off Limits. Off Limits podcast is definitely how it sounds. We do go to the subjects and things that nobody wants to talk about, but we want to talk about because the only way you can make a subject comfortable is to go to the uncomfortable area, so we're definitely going to do that today. Also, aside earlier than that, of course, the other people I usually hang out with, the rest of my compadres, Thomas, as we call the Mountain Puncher, Mr. No Longer Has a Beard, will actually doing his To Be Determined podcast. What is To Be Determined? To Be Determined is his podcast, which is basically about working out, lifestyle, exercise, ways that you can improve upon yourself, and of course him giving his own personal testimony, which will actually be today from 3 to 4. And also my other buddies, Vaughn, or A. Stephen Witherspoon on Facebook, actually has several podcasts of his own. He actually has the I Get That Reference VST, which is a short podcast about just music and news and things of that nature that he finds interesting that he wants to share with you. Pretty interactive show. He also has Rhythm This Week, Reminisce Over the Rhythm, where he actually goes over music and goes to a 4-tier system. What that 4-tier system is, you tune in to watch Rhythm to find out. And he also has Random as Fuck with Uncle VZ, which is basically a short podcast, which is just going over random videos and questions that he just calls conversation starters. So all 3 shows are interactive, and also our other buddy Trace has 2 podcasts of his own. One he has called The Bump Down, which the Bump Down is a musical podcast where he goes over everything that's on the main charts, on the underground, what's hot, what's coming up, artists, things of that nature. I always like to sit there and say, if you're an artist that's trying to learn more about the music business, or you're just curious about the recording industry itself, definitely watch his show, because he definitely has an interesting take on things. Of course, usually Vaughn's with them, so it's always an interesting conversation. He also has the Smoke with Truth, which is a direct, in-your-face, unorthodox, but highly intelligent conversation. It is definitely not for and I will stress this very heavily, it is definitely not for the faint of heart. But if you are about searching for the truth or having truthful conversations, then that show is for you. Also interactive. Anyway, all of our shows can be found in the Facebook group I Get That Reference. So if you look up I Get That Reference, it's a group that's open to all. The only thing you ask that you participate. So as long as you're liking, you're sharing, you're conversating, as long as you're basically being social, because that's the reason why you're on Facebook. If you're not on Facebook to be social, then you're a creeper and we don't really need you. So hopefully you're doing that. And also YouTube videos. All of our podcasts have YouTube videos. So if you look up I Get That Reference, if you look up The Bump Down, if you look up How the Frack We Got Here, if you look up all of the podcasts, they all have our latest up-to-date podcast there for you to new and view. You can like, share, subscribe from there. And also, Vaughn, Trace, if you're watching this, please drop the links for your audio-only podcast, as they are available on iTunes, Google Play, and I believe, Trace, you have your music on Spotify now. So, guys, if you're watching this, please post your links down at the bottom. But I will say at the end of every my podcast, How the Frack We Got Here's main mission is to basically keep people to stay informed. Because when you stay informed, that means you know a lot more about the situation than what's going on. You're able to go out and not take everything at face value. You're able to go out, look into it, research, find out the truth for yourself, and be able to share it with someone else who may be inspired to turn around and do the same. Because an informed country can make a hell of a lot better decisions than an uninformed country, because an uninformed country got us Trump. So hopefully, guys, you guys are that's pretty much what we got for today. So hopefully, guys, again, thank you for watching. If you're watching this on the playback, go ahead and commentate as normal, especially Trump supporters, because y'all guys love your 2, 3 a.m. people. Really appreciate that. But aside from that, guys, it's the whole thing of just, enjoy the weekend. For everybody else that's hanging in for the shutdown, hang in there, because, you ain't alone. And at the same time, guys, stay informed, stay at peace, stay ready, and stay woke. Peace.